That's the
I
question.
don't know. I don't remember.
Maybe we need it in a PDF.
I'm
I
not
think,
sure
well, we
which
got
way.
more stuff.
Okay,
I just don't know enough about stuff
I
like
don't either. I'm learning. Trust me, I got 2 kids
Yeah,
that
I
are
know.
teaching me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
No question.
Yep.
Guess we don't know yet. Guess we are.
We're on.
Uh-huh.
I just don't know that we're streaming and recording yet.
I don't know, but the thingy's on. You want to sign? Oh, no.
Are we good to go?
Nick? Are we ready yet?
Recording and everything? All right. I call the regular council meeting for Norton City Council for Monday, September 9th, 2019 to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silent reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated, please. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Kernan,
Here.
Ms. Whipke,
Here?
Mr. Gaynor,
Here.
Mr. McGlone,
Here.
Mr. Krant,
Here.
Mr. Towsley,
Here.
and Mr. Pelot.
Mr. Pilot's excused. Communications from the public. Mayor Judge?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to take a few moments, Norton City Council, Mayor Zita, to thank you, first of all, for your service to the community. I know it's not easy, working with things like neighborhoods and infrastructure and finance to try to improve the community. But to you and to the residents that are here, with everything that you guys discuss, it's nice that we can have some fun on the backs of our children playing youth football. But what the two communities have been able to accomplish over the last few years is short of amazing. And having a little fun with the football teams, I think just goes to show that both communities are willing to work and play together. Luckily for me, Barberton won. And also, if you saw the picture of the jersey Mayor Zito was wearing, luckily Barberton won because I could not fit in that jersey. So I win on 2 accounts. But just wanted to thank you and appreciate the workmanship that we have with both communities and the fact that we can have a little fun with the football teams. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Amy Sir Lewis. When you get up there, give your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, great, thanks. So my name is Amy Sir Lewis. My husband and I and our family live at 5734 Kungle Road. We have a Norton mailing address, and we're Norton City Schools, but it is also New Franklin. So we pay taxes to all of you. That's pretty much what it means. I'm here today to talk about the Kungle Road collapse. We are longtime Kungle Road residents. We have lived in our house for 13 years, and we would really like to see the road reopened. There's convenience issues just coming to and from Norton, which is where we do most of our shopping, and we use the library, and Norton's our community. That's what we consider our community. And then from the highway, even coming off Route 21, it's just more inconvenient to come down Eastern and get on Kungle Road. And then just from a safety standpoint, the garbage trucks are having to back down the road, which is super dangerous because there's no place for them to turn around. Mail and package delivery, and then we have concerns about snow plowing once the weather changes. Taylor Road is experiencing a lot more traffic than they had before because Kungle Road is closed right now. And the west side of the pavement on Taylor Road is actually starting to collapse. Some of you, if you've ever been down there, probably have noticed that. There are cones there. And with the winter weather approaching, that's another safety concern for us, is that little road, which is actually even smaller than Kungle, is just getting even more wear and tear from the extra traffic. So we'd like to see this issue resolved in a way that communicates what's happening to us as residents and gets input from us as residents as well, all the way up and down Kungle Road, plus other residents who live in the community beyond, both sides of the collapse. I think it's a pretty well-traveled thoroughfare. And we understand that issues like this can take a while to figure out, But we want to know a couple of things. Number one, our question, and I guess I can pause after this if you guys have feedback for me, but number one, we'd like to know if it's true that city council members are leaning towards not repairing the road at all, and if so, where that decision lies. So that's our first question. Our second question is, if the plan is to repair, is there a current plan in motion to establish definitively whose responsibility this is? Understanding was that at a meeting in June, it was decided that Norton New Franklin would be working together to solve this problem. If this is happening behind the scenes, are we going to get some sort of an update on that plan at some point? And if not, why not? So that's pretty much it. So I'm not sure if I just wait now and see if you guys have any feedback for me, or...
Mr. Marker, do you want to, or do you want me to?
I mean,
No, it's fine. So I think the plan generally, as you mentioned, there was a question about jurisdictional responsibility. The engineer maintained that bridge for a number of years. They gave it to New Franklin. New Franklin determined that it wasn't actually within their jurisdictional boundaries. So they said, here, Norton, have it, and that was right before it collapsed. So we're all trying to figure that issue out still. The plan is for the three communities, I guess, New Franklin, Norton, and the county engineer's office to enter into an MOU to go seek grant funding to replace the bridge. So we're aware of it. We know. I understand your frustration. I understand the need to move forward. That's the plan. It's going to take some time, but that's the plan as of now.
So it closed in April because of the road beginning to collapse, and then, of course, it collapsed fully in June. That's still several months out. Now, I actually spoke with Mr. Paradise at the Summit County Engineer's office today. He said up to this time, they have not received any communication from the city of Norton. So can you address that? Is that true or not true?
No, that's not true.
Okay, so they have something from you
Yes.
guys that's waiting on them to respond?
We're all working together right now. We've had communications within the last couple of weeks, and on that very issue, that memorandum of understanding issue. So yes, we do have those communications.
So what would be the next logical step that we as the public will expect to see?
You'll see MOU being introduced here
Okay.
at Norton City Council. I think the engineer's office doesn't need to have legislation, but we'll have legislation to authorize that for the parties to enter into that type of agreement. I assume New Franklin will have something similar, but I haven't spoken to them about that.
Okay. So then just practically speaking, what does that mean for us as residents?
we're just looking for your patience because it's going to take some time.
It'll take some time.
Yeah, 'cause-
Is the intention to fix the road?
Yeah.
Is that the intention at
Yes.
the time?
yeah, it's just who's going to,
Kind of permanently
No.
closed?
no, who's going to pay for it? I mean, and I know there's been discussion, if I may. I know there's been some discussion, and I think I've heard today that they said, well, that they believe that the city of Norton doesn't wish to fix it. Well, I think right now the argument or the discussion is who's paying for it and where the money's coming from.
Right?
Because we, as the city of Norton or New Franklin as well, if it doesn't belong to us, I mean, that's the thing. We're trying to, as far as ownership, and
Right.
I mean, even once we figure out who it actually belongs to, the money's it's going to be where's the money coming from.
Sure.
But again, we can't expend money on a project that doesn't actually belong to us.
Right, I think we all understand that. I think we're just still trying to figure out what that means, though. If you guys are communicating with Summit County, what is the next step? Like, how do we know, who's in charge of what?
So I think the big question is if all of the communities enter into this memorandum of understanding, we have a better chance of getting funding. And then once the funding's there, then you have to do your bids, you have to do the engineering, and it has to be fixed. But it's really stuck at two things: who owns it, where's the money coming from?
Right. So how do we get it unstuck as residents? What would be our next step? Who do we need to communicate with or talk to see if we can help move that ball forward?
I mean, you're here tonight,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
and I think
But it
that's
sounds to me like you guys are willing to work.
No.
It's just, you're saying you're not getting communication back from the other two parties, is that correct?
No.
I
we
just-
didn't say that,
things
no.
take time.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. Okay.
But we'll be seeing legislation coming forward fairly soon on the MOU from our side. So,
All right.
But in an effort to be transparent, seeking funding doesn't mean getting funding necessarily.
Sure.
And I just want to,
That's true.
if that fails, then we have to start all over again.
Sure. No, we definitely understand that. I think we're just trying to figure out what the logical steps are. We're feeling a little in the dark about what the process is, so we're just trying to figure
Well,
that part
kind
out.
of
So,
navigating our way through it.
right. Okay, good. Okay,
thank you. Thanks. Jim Bennett?
Hello, I'm Jim Bennett, 3648 Durham Road here in Norton. I just wanted to address a concern I have with the Barberton Speedway, and I get it. When I bought my house, I knew the Speedway was there. I've lived here a long time, so as it turns out, I'm a car racing fan myself. So I've been to the Barberton Speedway. They put on a good show. My specific objection has to do with racing until 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, like they did on August 31st. So I just wanted to ask if there's anything that you as council could do. If it's a legislative solution, I'd like to encourage you to consider a noise ordinance that has a reasonable cutoff time that balances the needs of a business with the needs of citizens. And if legislation's already in place to address that, then I would ask that be enforced if it hasn't already been enforced. And that was it.
Thank you. Any comments or?
Yeah, I'll tell them, but Jim, we are working on the problem that caused that night. You're not the only one that's complained. We are, all of us up here and administration is working for a solution for next season for sure. They got 2 more Saturdays to go, and then we'll be working on it.
Anything else on that one? Terry Hamilton.
Terry Hamilton, 1298 Overlook Drive, Norton. Been here since about last 45 years. I sent all of you an email on Sunday, August 28th. I hope you all got it and read it. I'm here tonight about the excessive noise at Barberton Speedway. Prior to the present owners, I periodically called the police department in the city to report the disturbing of the peace at late hours when my family and I were trying to sleep. It never did any good, but at least it gave me a way to vent. When the Barberton Speedway closed up, life became peaceful again. We started having cookouts out in the backyard again, started having bonfires, we opened the windows again. We were able to hear our TV inside the house again, and we were able to sleep again. Life was good. Then after 2 years of peace and quiet, the roar came back. Even though I was previously told by a few of our elected officials that there would never be racing at Barberton Speedway again. When the Speedway started up again, there was supposedly a gentleman's agreement that no race would start after 10:30. The Speedway said that they wanted to be a good neighbor. Well, the agreement has been abused. I have called the police in this city many times when I was trying to get some sleep. On Saturday, August 27th, the Saturday night racing went on until 1 o'clock a.m. Sunday morning. I called the police and was told that there was nothing that they could do. I was instructed to contact City Council. So here I am again. I've been here once before. Barberton Speedway began operation in 1958. Back then, it was on the outskirts of Norton, and noise really wasn't an issue. Today, over 800 homes have been built within a mile of the Speedway. Norton Acres, Mount Vernon, Stonewick, the side streets on Norton Avenue, Alden Lane, Houston, and there's a new allotment being built on Clark Mill right now. Today, the noise affects a lot of Norton residents. Recently, Norton has decided to change from the past and into the future. We have a new high school, a new football stadium. We have new sewers in Nash Heights. We have new storm sewers going on in Cleveland-Maslin Road. And those things are happening because we're replacing things from the past. The noise from the past, or the noise from Barberton Speedway needs to change too. Start by using mufflers. Plant more trees as a sound barrier. Build a wall. Really big walls are in fashion right now. Start racing earlier in the day. You know, things really need to change. You know, I understand car racing is still relevant and should be enjoyed by all. However, forcing the residents to endure the noise from both inside and outside of your house, it needs to change. The city needs to have a specific time that all loud noise ceases in the city. 10 p.m. is the time used by most area communities. The city also needs to have the Barberton Speedway find a way to suppress their noise. I hope Norton and the Speedway find a way to stop this nuisance. And just as another subject, my wife and I attended the Touch a Truck at Columbia Woods yesterday. It was a wonderful event attended by many, many people. And I would like those that are responsible to put on the event to be recognized and commended. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Nick Jennis. Yeah, come on up to the... That's okay. Just give your name and address up there and whatever comments you want.
Nicholas Agentis, 3340 Eastern Road, Norton, Ohio. The first comment I'd like to make is, in addressing to the previous gentleman who spoke on the racing, it's quite interesting that on 3340 Eastern Road, I could hear that dragway quite clearly, and that's quite a distance. And of course, the reason for that is that the sounds are they're low frequency sounds. They have very long wavelengths, and the sound travels very, very far. So that was plainly heard at 3340 Eastern Road on that evening. In addition, I'm backing up what I previously heard. I live very close to the bridge that was washed out, and like any project, there should be project leaders. There should be a person assigned at Franklin, Norton, and what's the other community involved?
County.
What's that?
It's the county. It's
The county,
New
yeah.
Franklin, City of
But
Norton.
particularly, there should be project leaders or a project person in charge in each city to best gather information and to have information, up-to-date information available on that project. I myself found it somewhat odd that really no one knew what the status was in this meeting on that project, other than funding. And then the third item is a comment on the Eastern Road corridor. In the Barberton Herald, I read an article about upping the load limit on Eastern Road for the benefit of the Clinton Aluminum. I think it mentioned that in Barber Road. And I guess I'm going to make a comment that should use caution in doing that. To up a load limit without an extensive engineering study would not be a good thing to do, because in order to do that, you would have to gain knowledge about the construction of the road, perhaps doing some bore testing and so on, see how depth it is. And further, there has to be a study that calculates what one wheel does versus two wheels do. And it's not at the surface of the road, it's down beneath the road, because the distribution of forces on two wheels is very much different than the distribution of forces on one wheel. You have a cone-shaped pattern, it goes down into the ground, and they could intersect an inch below, 2 inches, 3 inches. You need to know what that substrate before you do anything about increasing the load on the road. And further, I don't know what corridor means, but I see that there's not a whole lot of benefit to a corridor right there. I think if there was a corridor on that road, I think it really would benefit Franklin Township. It would probably benefit Barberton. Right now, there are no semis on the road, but with an increase in load and a corridor, I could see Butcher Construction going down there. A multitude of big companies going down there, B&W, that chemical company, J&J, whatever it is, by the railroad tracks. But I can see everybody on that side of Barberton going down Eastern to 21, where in fact, all you have to do is go to Johnson's Road to 585 to pick up 21. So I don't think there's a urgent need to do that, at least at that point. But certainly, I would have somebody seriously look into the technicalities of simply increasing the load capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are going to come back to reports from officers, boards, and commissions, committee of the whole and all of that. We're going to move on to the public hearing. I now declare the public hearing convened on ordinance number 100, 2019. Ordinance number 100, 2019 is an ordinance to the zoning code of the city by amending section 1287.04. Mr. Markey, would you please certify the legal notice was published in the Post on August 24th, 2019?
I hereby certify that the legal notice for this public hearing was published in the Norton Post on August 24th, 2019.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the said ordinance? Please step forward, give your name and address to the stenographer, and you have 5 minutes. For the second time, is there anyone who wishes to speak for the ordinance? For the third and final time, is there anyone who wishes to speak for the ordinance? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the said ordinance? Please step forward, give your name and address to the stenographer. You have 5 minutes. For the second time, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the ordinance? For the third and final time, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the ordinance? I now declare the public hearing closed. Under Committee of the Whole, reports from the standing committees. Letter A, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're looking to purchase a dump truck, and we're looking to move ordinance 102, 2019 to tonight's agenda. This is for an 2020 F550 one-ton snowplow / dump truck at a cost not to exceed $55,225 for next year from Ganley Ford. This is part of our replacement program that we put in place to make sure that our street department can keep up with doing everything they need to do for us. This is already it's in the budget for the 2020 already, and it actually won't be delivered until early 2020. We just need to get something started to make sure we can get these vehicles in place to be able to use while it's still winter. I did have a question before we get going any further.
Okay.
I guess this, Mr. Fowler, is this a lease to buy or an outright purchase?
This is part of our capital lease, but it's a lease to buy. It's not. We're not leasing vehicles and then turning back.
Right.
It's just
We're actually buying.
When people hear lease, though, they think you're essentially renting a vehicle, but it's a
so
lease
we're
to
making
purchase.
Payments.
Correct. It's
so
just
we're not putting out all this $55,000
Correct.
in one fell
Correct.
swoop.
And just to be clear, Ms. Whipke, if I may, we're reutilizing a current aluminum bed. Our staff will switch it over, and we'll be able to. We're saving a significant amount of money by not buying a new bed and reallocating one that's currently used. It's aluminum that our staff will put on the chassis.
Yeah, that's almost another $50,000, wasn't it?
It's a good little. I don't know the price, but it's extensive.
Significant amount. I motion to add ordinance 102, 2019 to tonight's agenda for a first reading.
I'll second that. Call the roll, please.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Letter B, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is another purchase for the service department of an M2 chassis, M2 106 from Valley Freightliner and Western Star Snow, and it's another snowplow dump truck, not to exceed $77,850. And again, as part of our replacement program put in place for the street department, it's in the 2020 budget, and again, it will not be delivered until early 2020. Again, this is a lease or buying. Okay, that's what I thought. So we're not putting out all that money at once. And then I had a question. The spec sheet has a price of $140,535, and then our ordinance is for $77,850. And I'm thinking that's because we're actually getting the appurtenances in the next ordinance, and that's the difference in the price there.
Yes, I believe that to be accurate, yes.
Okay, this is with emergency language, and that's due to the fact that we need to put this order in so that they can actually get this ready for us to be able to use in timely fashion.
It can go 3 reads, but yeah, the emergency is for it to take effect immediately.
So we don't need the 3 readings, okay?
We can go 3 reads. It's okay. It can go 3 reads. I just need, if it,
Yeah, I misspoke.
right. If the emergency language allows it to happen, so if it takes place in October, we can order it in October. And we do need to order it in October so we can try to get it here by January. And it is a state bid item, and I can get, and I don't know that I included that in your packet. I apologize, but I'll get you the state bid items to show that it was bid competitively.
On the previous one, any extra bids on that, could we get that?
I will get those.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
apologize. I put the packet together, so.
Understandable.
Okay, again, I make a motion to add ordinance 103, 2019, tonight's agenda for first reading.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Mr. Currant?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Letter C, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Basically, this is just a continuation off of 103, and this is for appurtenances or parts to go on to the big dump truck in future that we were just looking at, with a price not to exceed $61,500 from American Road Machinery Company. And actually, by getting it through them, this is actually saving us between $1,000 and $2,000 off the price. Again, this would have emergency language, and since we don't have to waive any readings for the major part of it, we should not have to waive any here.
That's correct. That's correct. You can go 3 reads.
At this time, I motion to add ordinance 104, 2019 to tonight's agenda for first reading.
I'll second that. Is there any further discussion?
I do have a question.
Mr. Towesley?
On the quote page, it says subtotal 62.5, but the legislation says 61.5.
Yeah, I'm actually texting Larry right now to get some information on that, and I will get that for you by the end.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Mr. Currant?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Letter D, crack ceiling, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for the crack ceiling bid for Easton Road and Greenwich Roads. I noticed in the documentation that we had also Norton Avenue and Johnson Road. Are those included in it, or is this just Eastern and Greenwich?
So due to the budget constraints, we bid all 4, hoping that the bids would come back, that we could do all 4. Unfortunately, the bids are such that we only have enough money to do Easton and Greenwich. And because Easton's relatively recently paved, I think it was 2 years ago, the idea is to maintain that road before the winter so as to keep the water from getting in the cracks. Johnson Road, you may recall, we recently applied for a grant to redo Johnson from Hametown to the corner. Johnson Corner's going east. So we felt because we're applying for a grant, we would do the roads that aren't set to be repaved anytime in the future.
And again, just for the public's interest and clarity, this is basically preventative maintenance that we can keep up with the roads that we've already put a lot of money into. And can this go 3 readings because it has emergency language?
I would hope that we could, at maybe the next council meeting, waive the reading so that we can get it done before winter.
So we're looking to waive the 3rd reading.
Yes, if we could, be so kind.
At this time, I motion to add ordinance 105, 2019 to tonight's agenda for first reading.
I'll second that. Is there any further discussion or questions?
I guess to Robert, like, what, is there like a certain temperature it's got to be to put that crack ceiling down? I mean,
As long as it has to be a reasonable temperature, it can't be November cold.
Okay.
It's gonna, as long as we get done in October, you know, if you remember, we passed a striping, or it may be still on the agenda, but I'd like to get the crack sealing done before the striping, because I don't want to put stripes down and then come back and crack seal over
I
top.
just don't want to put this down.
Right.
It's not going to stick.
No, as long as we get it done in October. Normally, we're doing crack sealing in October.
Okay. Okay.
Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Mr. Currant?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Letter E, Columbia Woods Walking Trails, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for ordinance to allow Perrin Asphalt to put in part of the Columbia Woods Walking Trail, as I understand it, at a price not to exceed $55,000, of which we do have a grant for $40,000. We do need to put out the total amount to begin with, and then we will get reimbursement later from our CDBG grant. And this also has emergency language, so is this something that we need to waive readings on?
I would say the second or third reading, if we could waive the third reading at the next meeting. So just to be clear, that we have to draw the first draw in October, and the project has to be constructed by November. So we have kind of a tight window because of the grant reimbursement. So if we could waive the last reading of the month at the end of the month, it would be appreciated.
Just for my clarification, when you say that we have to draw and construct it, that means it has to be done by November?
It has to be done in November, but so when they mobilize, if you notice, there's a bid for mobilization. So that draw for mobilization will be our first draw from the grant. So we'll pay it, then we'll get reimbursed. But as long as we do that in October, we can get reimbursed from, they'll hold the money. Their concern is if you don't spend the money by October, you're not going to spend it. And that money doesn't roll over from the county, so they're obligated to spend their block grant dollars. So they just want to make sure that the project's moving forward and that you're going to draw your funds to make sure that it's.
So does that mean if we did not have it done by November, we could lose grant money?
Yes. We're going to have it done by November. I assure you of that.
Okay, well then I have one more question tied to that. Say it doesn't happen, then could we hold Perrin?
They'll get it done. We've had conversation of the time frame and the consideration of what's going on with the grant money, and it has to be a prevailing wage because it's federal grant money and all the requirements for it.
Okay, at this time I motion to add ordinance 106, 2019 to tonight's agenda for first reading.
I'll second that. Is there any further discussion?
I've got one question, Mr.
Mr.
President.
Towesley?
Before we're reimbursed through the grant money, I know Mr. Messner's not here, but what fund is that?
That'll come from the Land Improvement Fund.
Okay.
I think it's 175.
410.
410. I'm sorry. I knew.
Okay.
I was going to say 140, but my dyslexia kicked in. It's really 410.
Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Mr. Currant? Yes. Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Letter F, General Fund Policy. Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is actually, we're establishing a financial policy to make sure that we have monies available to be used. And we generally carry $2.3 million every year. Of what we want to do is keep a minimum of 25% balance in the general fund. Would even like to do 30, but 25% will be the minimum. Anything over that percent would go into the rainy day fund and the 27th pay fund. There's no law for this. It's just a method to make sure we have cash on hand when needed, and so we're trying to save some money back. Anybody?
I just wanted to add, since Mr. Messner's not here, every time we talk to the rating agency, the city maintains a pretty solid AA rating. They ask the question, do you have a general fund policy? So it's just a good tool to have for the city to have a formal policy when you're going into budgeting, to be able to follow that and to show to outside parties that you do have that. Helps maintain the city's bond rating if we do something like this.
So this would actually help us get money in the future if we need.
Well, help us maintain our bond rating, which gives a favorable interest rate to the city. So
Favorable interest.
Yeah.
I've got a question.
Mr. Towsley?
On the policy under general fund and rainy day fund, they say as determined by council. Are those automatic actions, or those have to come to council before they're added to those funds?
Yeah, no, it's just like last year. If at year end there's a balance in the general fund, it's up to council to authorize a transfer. Council passes the budget, so you'd have to amend the appropriations to do it, and you'd have to also authorize the transfer.
Okay.
So it's not taking away any.
So it's our
any authority
policy,
of
but council still will
Yeah.
decide.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, at this time, I motion to add ordinance 107, 2019 to tonight's agenda for first reading.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Ms. Whipke,
Yes.
Mr. Kernan,
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor,
Yes.
Mr. McGlone,
Yes.
Mr. Currant,
Yes.
Mr. Towsley.
Yes.
Letter G, New Park Drive land donation that falls to my committee. This is property that's being donated to the city of Norton by the city of Barberton, correct?
Correct. They own a parcel in New Park that's kind of a pie-shaped parcel that once held a pump station. When the sewer line went in, they no longer needed that parcel, and we can use it for the outflow of some stormwater. So that's why they have agreed to donate to us.
So we will receive this donated property and then at least help to mitigate some of the water problems.
Correct.
That we
I
have
believe
down
it's going to be a storage. I'd be misspeaking if
Okay.
I tried to explain engineering. So
three readings okay, or do we need to? Okay.
yes, we should.
All right. I will move then to add ordinance number 109, 2019 to 108, 2019 to tonight's agenda for its first reading.
I'll second.
Motion second to add 108, 2019. Is there any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Kernan,
Yes.
Ms. Whipke,
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor,
Yes.
Mr. McGlone,
Yes.
Mr. Currant,
Yes.
Mr. Towsley.
Yes.
I did pretty good without my glasses until I got there for some reason. Letter H, Eastern Road Corridor Study, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking of the devil, Mr. Janice, I think this kind of hits on what you were saying. This is a contract with GPD for an engineering study for Eastern Road. And Barberton, Norton, and New Franklin, as I understand it, will be involved in this at not to exceed $38,400, and that amount would be divided amongst the three municipalities. Is that
That's correct. Each entity would be responsible. I think it's 16,000, just under 17,000 for all three entities.
I guess my question is Fairland in this, or did we already, is that going to have a study done as well?
No, this is separate. This is just Eastern Road from 21 West. I'm sorry, 21 East. 21 East. And the idea is to perform a study because it traverses all three municipalities. There's a portion of it that's in New Franklin, portion in Barberton. A majority of it is in Norton. The idea is to address the gentleman's concern is to make sure that the road, we can go get grant funding to improve the road to handle any
Be able to handle that.
traffic. Correct.
And just, Robert, I think it says 12-8, not 17.
Okay, I'm sorry. 12.
12-8. That's
I'm
right.
Trying to go off of memory,
That's
which is
okay.
never a good idea. But
Okay. At this time, I motion to add ordinance 109, 2019 to tonight's agenda for first reading.
I'll second that. Is there any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Ms. Whipke,
Yes.
Mr. Kernan,
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor,
Yes.
Mr. McGlone,
Yes.
Mr. Currant,
Yes.
Mr. Towsley.
Yes.
Letter I, Eastern Road Study MOU, Mr. Gaynor.
The way I understand it, this is to allow us to pass an ordinance to enter into an agreement of understanding with the different municipalities to do this actual study. Is that correct?
That's correct. That outlines the terms under which we will share the payment or the receivable of the contract.
Okay. I'd like to move to have this put on tonight's agenda, please.
I'll second. Is there any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Currant?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
There are no consideration of prior minutes. Reports from officers, boards, and commissions. Mayor Zita.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to announce, I know it was brought up earlier, but we did have the Touch a Truck this past weekend, and it turned out very nice. It was the first annual that was brought to us, and it was had. But safety forces, the police, the fire, the service department, all went in and pitched in and made it happen. It was quite. If anybody who had the experience to come down and experience it, it was quite an experience. We had the police, fire, and service vehicles, as well as a host of other vehicles and a variety of equipment. We also had the Metro Health helicopter come in and land here on the football field, which attracted a little bit of attention at that time and so forth. But it was pretty cool watching them come in, and they were here for a little bit. Kids climbed in, climbed on, around, and then shortly thereafter they left. But there's with an event such as that, we had donations that were made by Acme, by Barberton Tree, by the Fraternal Order of Police, the Firefighters Association, and then we had a number of other agencies. Man-Can, Pedal Stompers Productions brought cameras and did a lot of the photos and so forth for him as well. Bill Brayman brought his ice cream truck in, and like he said, but all in all, it was a fantastic day. And like I said, I want to commend the group that did. They all worked very well together in order to make that happen. And it turned out to be a very nice event. So.
Mr. Fowler.
To address some of the concerns with the Speedway, I know you all have been in receipt of a letter. Captain Lane had met with the owner of the Speedway and discussed some parameters of what we deem as an acceptable situation. And I know that there's some frustration with the residents, and I think I've spoken to Mr. Hamilton personally and told him that we will work with the residents to address their concerns. And while I think they may have felt that we weren't listening in the past, we have taken action. We've made it clear that we will not accept that any longer, and that 1 o'clock, well, 12 o'clock, whatever, it has to be reasonable. It has to be reasonable to our constituents and our neighbors, and be a good neighbor. So I just wanted to make you all aware. We are addressing that internally to make sure that when phone calls are made, the right authorities are made aware, and we can intervene. Cleveland-Massillon Road project hasn't maybe gone as smoothly as we'd hoped. We get many a call from a resident or a business that the contractor isn't providing access. We deal with those complaints daily, and we are trying to mitigate that. I just remind you that that's an ODOT managed project, so we have very limited authority, and one of the reasons that we have tried to bring those construction projects in-house is so we have more control over the contractor. Just to give you an example, last week, I think it was Nick's Pizza, some people were stuck over 40 minutes in the parking lot without being able to get in or out. We know that that's not acceptable. I'm sure you'll get complaints from some of the businesses. We are working with ODOT to try to mitigate those situations, but I wanted to make you aware that They're beyond our control because it's not our contract, but we are doing everything we can when we get those calls. In the next few weeks, we'll be updating our capital improvement plan. You saw 2 trucks on it for this year. It's been a mission since I've gotten here to update our equipment. And next year, you're going to see a $30,000 reduction in our operation maintenance of equipment by the updating our fleet. So while I understand people question why you spend so much money, but updating our fleet is reducing our costs over the longer term. So you'll see that reduction in the budget next year. We will be there seems to be some questions about ordinances in the parks. There's a city sign that's posted in Loyal Oak Park. We are working administratively to identify the ordinance that's appropriate for dogs to not be in the park, especially during events, due to kids, and we just for the public safety, we don't want dogs in the park during public events. So we're working on identifying the ordinance, because there were some changes in the ordinances that may have eliminated a provision that would allow us to do that. We get a lot of complaints on 2707 Wadsworth Road. Just making you aware that as of last week, we sent a letter instructing them they have 30 days to repair, demolish, or fix. One of the 3. But it's much like the 3 other processes we're going through, but I wanted to make you all aware that that's another house that I know Mr. Gaynor probably gets a call at least once a week on that property. And then lastly, I apologize, the toilet was running and I needed to make sure that, because we have a pump down, to make sure that the pump wasn't, or the cistern wasn't full. We have sent an email to Steve Bruno and Mayor Adamson of New Franklin requesting an MOU for the Kungle Road Bridge. Mayor Adamson signed on immediately. It wasn't a question. We're working through that issue with the county at this time, but we have reached out. So we hope to have something. We actually hope to have something to you today, but our goal is at the next council meeting to have something to move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Markey.
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Right. Mr. Kernan, before we move
Yes,
on.
Mr. Towsley.
I would just wonder if there's an update for Johnson Road as far as a timeline.
So I talked to Josh Slager, the city engineer, this morning. I've asked him to get me a timeline from Perrin because we have a very tight window to fit that in. But it should be, I would hope that they start by the end of the month, but we'll get you. As soon as I hear exact date, I'll be glad.
Nothing yet?
Nothing yet, but it will be done this year.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And I'm trying to remember, is all of Johnson Road getting done just from 2 separate sources? Is that what's going on?
So Johnson Road is a permissive tax street.
Okay.
And when you renew I'm going to give you a little history. So there's a fee that we pay on our license plate. When you renew your license plate, there's a license plate. It's a tax. A certain portion that goes to the city and a certain portion goes to the county. So Johnson Road is a permissive tax street. So is Hametown. When we paved Hametown as part of our annual paving project, the county collects a portion of our plate tax, and they hold it for Norton projects. So we submitted a reimbursement for Hametown based on that project. We got $200,000, because that's what it costs to do Hametown, reimbursed to the city. We're using that permissive tax because we still can, because Johnson's a permissive tax street. We're using the reimbursement for Hametown to redo Johnson. So that's how we got the little extra money that we have. That will be from the intersection of Hametown, just a little bit west of there. We're going to kind of, where it's the pavement's the worst, start there and head west. And we're going to do as much as we can. Just past, I think is it Mamie? Mamie? Just past Mamie is where it's the worst. And hopefully we can get there. So that'll take care of the west side. And once you get past Mamie, for the most part, that motor pave is held up for a little bit, if it can hold up until we can get more money to do the rest. But we applied for a grant through AMATS to do east of Hametown, because it wasn't done at the same time. I defer to Mr. Towsley because he's
No,
out
it was
there. East of Hametown to Johnson Corners was the AMATS grant, which it won't be next year. It'll be a couple years down the road. But the idea is to keep grant funding in the cycle so we can keep moving forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything else? Introduction of new legislation, ordinance number 102, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 102, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
President's going to read them. An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with Ganley Ford for the purchase of one F-550 4x4 dump truck in an amount not to exceed $55,225.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 103, 2019. Ms. Whipke?
Well, that was a first reading only for the 102. Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 103, 2019 for its first reading. Ask the President to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with Valley Freightliner and Western Star for the purchase of an M2 chassis in the amount not to exceed $77,850.
Reading only.
Ordinance number 104, 2019. Ms. Whipke?
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 104, 2019 for its first reading. Ask the President to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with American Road Machinery for the purchase of all appurtenances for the M2 dump truck in the amount not to exceed $61,500.
First reading only.
Yeah, let me flip over here. Ordinance number 105, 2019. Ms. Whipke?
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 105, 2019 for its first reading. Ask President to read it, please.
An ordinance accepting the bid of Specialized Construction Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $41,000 for the 2019 crack sealing program and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. First reading only.
Ordinance number 106, 2019. Ms. Whipke?
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 106, 2019 for its first reading and ask the President to read it, please.
An ordinance accepting the bid of Perrin Asphalt in an amount not to exceed $55,000 for the Columbia Woods Walking Trail project and declaring an emergency.
First reading only.
Ordinance number 107, 2019. Ms. Whipke?
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 107, 2019 for its first reading. Ask the President to read it, please.
An ordinance adopting a general fund policy for the city.
First reading only. Thank you.
Ordinance number 108, 2019 falls to me. I offer ordinance number 108, 2019, an ordinance authorizing the acceptance of donated land by the city of Barberton to the city of Norton and declaring an emergency. And that's for first reading. Ordinance number 109, 2019. Ms. Whipke?
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 109, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please. I mean the President. Sorry.
And an ordinance authorizing the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with GPD Group for professional services in connection with the Eastern Road Corridor Study in an amount not to exceed $38,400.
First reading only. Thank you.
Ordinance number 110, 2019. Mr. Gaynor?
Yes, I'd like to offer ordinance 110, 2019 for its first reading only and ask the President to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the execution of the Memorandum of Understanding with the City of Barberton and the City of New Franklin to participate in the corridor planning study for Eastern Road and State Route 21.
First reading only.
Introduction of prior legislation. Ordinance number 92, 2019. Mr. Carent?
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance number 92, 2019 for its second reading. Ask the President to read that, please.
An ordinance to amend Section 440.01 of the codified ordinances of the City of Norton and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Mr. President, I've got a question.
Yes.
I've got a note here to waive reading, third reading, and vote. This is the Eastern Fairland Road study, the weight limit. Is that correct? I didn't have that in this pocket, in this packet.
And Mr. Fowler, you may want to weigh in on this, but this is different than the east. So the corridor study is different than the truck weight limit issue. So the truck weight limit issue is, I think is important for upcoming projects. But the corridor study is a long-term look at the entire corridor of Eastern Road for the three communities. So they're not related to each other.
But this is pursuant to the new company coming in, and the weight limit has to do
Yes.
with that road.
Yes.
And I think that's an important question I didn't really have answered earlier. Mr. Jonas did bring up that question. He mentioned the corridor study. I'm looking at this. Do we have a study indicating that that road is sufficient? Did we do our due diligence on that before we raised the limit?
Well,
What's the impact on the road?
this ordinance is going to allow us to qualify for ODOT funds out of the 629 pot. If we choose not to pass it, we probably won't. We'll pass on that money, because in order for you to get ODOT funds for a project, it has to be truck acceptable. And actually, the Christina Wagner from ODOT emailed me today asking the status of this ordinance, which is why you have it as a request for a waiving of the third read. My hope and intention is that we get money for repaving that through ODOT.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
just so that I'm clear, the reason that we want to waive the third reading is because without passing this, it's unlikely that we're going to get this grant funding that we could possibly use to improve the road so that it can handle the weight limits of the trucks and things of that nature. Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct. But the study's also looking at traffic patterns and it does look at other things, including that. But
So this is all part of the
It's all-
planned project then?
Yes.
Okay. I just didn't have that in this week's packet. I'm sorry it was at home.
No.
Didn't know I should have brought it.
I have a question before we go any further. Okay, so we're going to pass this. This means the big trucks can go on that road. And that means as soon as we pass this, they will be able to access these two roads then, correct?
correct. There's some question of, I mean, it's a legal question, but there are some industrial clients already there, and it begs the question of whether or not they have the right to access their property from 21 because they're right there. So, because it traverses 3 different communities, it's been a tough question of whether or not we had enforcement capability to do that anyway.
I don't have an answer. It's just a question.
I assume that's Yellowstone and some other properties down that way.
Correct, because you have industrial clients already in existence, and
So I would be correct that this ordinance really doesn't, well, depending on what the other communities have done, this really only affects the road within our boundaries. Have Barberton and New Franklin done the same thing? I mean, do we know that?
New Franklin does not have. See, this is what makes it even more convoluted. New Franklin, according to the engineer, does not have that designated as a non-truck route.
Okay. So
Barberton does.
Okay.
So we're working through those issues as hopefully that's one of the things the study addresses, because you can't have one that has a non-designated truck or one that's a truck. That's why I said we got to do some work to fix it.
Do we have an application right now pending with someone, and that's why she was calling you or emailing you and asking about it?
The mayor and I met with ODOT several Wednesdays ago, talking about various projects, and there is some potential grant funding for that corridor.
Okay.
But it can't be, again, has to alleviate the non-truck designation.
Right. Okay.
I understand the somewhat urgency and the nature of this, and although I feel like it's sort of putting the cart before the horse in a sense, I think this is something necessary to do for the funding and have the potential to work on that road if it needs work. So I guess this is something we need to move forward. I would like to move that we waive the third reading and bring that to a vote tonight.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to waive the third reading of ordinance number 92, 2019. Is there any further discussion regarding waiver of the reading only? Call the roll on the waiver.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
at this time, I would like to move that we adopt 92, 2019.
Second.
Second. Yep.
I have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 92, 2019. Is there any further discussion regarding the ordinance itself? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Ordinance number 98, 2019. I offer ordinance number 98, 2019 for its second reading. An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with Orchard Hills and McClement Incorporated for professional engineering services in connection with the preparation of a parks capital improvement plan in an amount not to exceed $29,600. That's for second reading only. Ordinance number 100, 2019. Mr. Gaynor.
Yes, this is an ordinance, I offer ordinance 100, 2019 for its second reading. This is for the changing of the process for the Brookside MUD area.
An ordinance to amend the zoning code of the city by amending section 1287.04. And that's for a second reading only.
Second
tonight?
reading only.
Okay. Ordinance number 101, 2019. Mr. Carent?
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'd like to introduce ordinance number 101, 2019 for its second reading. Ask the president to read it, please.
An ordinance accepting the bid of J.D. Striping and Services Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $16,610 for the 2019 pavement marking program and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to move that we waive the third reading and bring that to a vote tonight for ordinance 101, 2019.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the third reading of ordinance number 101, 2019. Any further discussion regarding waiver?
This is for the striping, and it's urgent we get this done before the cold weather.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
At this time, I'd like to move that we adopt ordinance number 101, 2019.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 101, 2019. Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Ordinance number 84, 2019. Mr. Gaynor.
Yes, I'd like to offer ordinance number 84, 2019 for its sixth reading.
An ordinance rezoning property described as permanent parcel numbers 46-04166 in the city from a C-REC district to a mixed-use district.
Sixth reading only.
Thank you. Any public service announcements, Mayor?
Yes, I have a couple, thank you. First of all, we have the Norton Cider Festival. The 31st Annual Norton Cider Festival will be coming up October 4th, 5th, and 6th here at Columbia Woods Park. Like I said, basically things are getting set and arrangements are being made to hopefully put together another nice event for that weekend. So once again, it's October 4th, 5th, and 6th. We also have the Norton Women's Club doing their craft show and gift show. That will be Saturday, October 19th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Norton Elementary School. That's 3390 Cleveland-Massillon Road. And last but not least, Trick or Treat will be October 26th. It's a Saturday evening. Trick or Treat from 5 until 7 p.m. here in the city. We ask that everybody tries to stick with the 5 to 7 on October 26th. This will allow our safety forces to be out in force and keep the roads safe for all our ghosts and goblins that are out doing trick-or-treating. So that's October 26th from 5 to 7 p.m. here in the city of Norton. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other public service announcements from anyone?
Yes, I'd like to ask everyone to please keep the family of Frank Roble in mind in their prayers since he passed away last Tuesday. And he's been a prominent businessman and friend to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I would hope that everybody recognizes the fact that he's passed away. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further announcements? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.
I didn't get in. Bob got him. Got him. Yeah, they all got him.